It's Monday again.
I haven't seen you in 30 seconds.
All good. But today I'm really excited because today we are talking about Twitter.
Twitter. Yay.
So I am by myself right now, but Faye will be joining me shortly. And there she is. We're having some major technical issues today. We had it. I don't know what it is with Monday. I think the internet is still on weekend mode.
Yep.
So literally this morning we did our hot topics and same thing. We kind of came in and out. We were frozen a couple of times and then we both left at different times. Then we had a networking power hour this morning and it was so difficult. Everyone's having issues because everybody that came on, again, thank you everyone who joined us. You know, sometimes it was like I couldn't see, they couldn't hear me, they couldn't see my video, and other people that were trying to jump on and they're like, I'm here. So we ended up going old school and using chat. And then here we are this morning, or this afternoon. So we'll see how it goes for this.
That's why instead of chatting and doing video, we should just tweet. What a segue.
Almost like that was planned.
Yeah.
So before we jump in, so what I am going to do today, for those of you who are watching, I'm going to share my screen, which we typically don't do on Master Monday. We just, we kind of talk about a specific topic, but I feel like this one, I want to show kind of how Twitter works. I'm going to do the desktop version because it's easier to share on here, but the mobile is exactly the same. Faye, what is your favorite thing about Twitter?
I always feel like, well, first of all, as a user, my favorite thing actually is to be somebody who reads the tweets. So anytime I want to find out anything that's going on in the world or anything that's going down the street, I know that my local school tweets, the police station tweets, accidents, anything you can think of. If I'm watching the Oscars, you get to hear about what people think about the clothes and the red carpet and stuff. It's just immediate, and it seems to be the go-to resource.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably the best way of describing is the go-to resource.
Yeah.
So I apologize. I know that there's an echo on my end. We're going to try to push through and see if it kind of corrects itself. But that's kind of, I agree with that. It's my go-to resource in regards to, like, I think their tagline is about conversations. I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like. But you're right. If there's something going on in the world, it is my go-to. I literally, first thing I do, open up Twitter. Sporting events going on, I immediately open up Twitter. Even my son got a Twitter account because when he's watching basketball, he likes to see what tweets, what things are being talked about, news, current events, traffic, like as simple or as basic as you can get. Twitter. I mean, there was jokes when Twitter first came out, what did they say? You're in a burning building and it's like, you call 911 first, you don't tweet. But that's because that was like, literally it's in the moment.
Yeah. And it is, what's interesting about it as well is we kind of don't give it the, platitudes it deserves because it is pretty awesome. And we sort of take it for granted because we use it a lot. I like to follow people that, are certain, humor and stuff. And then you kind of forget that, well, hang on, this is a great platform for you to use for your business or to get your message out. And I think we just sort of we're focused usually on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, and then we forget about the mighty Twitter.
The mighty Twitter. And it's interesting because there's actually a lot of things that originated with Twitter that we kind of forget. We don't give them kudos.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily on the cutting edge any longer around sort of being the first. But they do, and I think we kind of alluded to this last week when we were talking about the fact that we were going to talk about Twitter today, was the fact that they have stayed true to their platform. They have not gone, oh, well, Instagram's this, so we need to adopt that, or Facebook is this, or whatever. They have stuck to the fact that it is short snippets of conversation. So it went from 140 to 280 characters within the last couple of years, but it is short pieces of information, and they only give you that limit in regards to characters. And that is purposeful. They started with that. That was their original concept, which was to tweet, which was short little things that you could say, which is where short codes came in, shortened way of saying things. And they've stuck with that. So they still focus on the fact that it is tweets, which is short messages and short conversations, which I love.
So great. It's great because sometimes people talk too much.
Well, you know what, but you're right. And I think sometimes when I'm just going to share my screen here so that I can see what's going on. What's going on with my thing? So you're right. I think that's the biggest challenge, not necessarily that people talk too much, but people feel like they need to say so much in a social media post. And what you don't realize is that you can actually get the same information across with something like a tweet, like something very short and quick.
It's a great way to actually learn how to give the most important information you have out, and be able to speak better, whether it's on stage or on camera and on a podcast. If Twitter's training you to give your most important information quickly, easily, and in a little tiny snippet. So I think
that's where a lot of people may not like Twitter, because they'll say, but I can't say, like, I can't figure out how to say all of this into a short little tweet. And it's like, well, then you use multiple. Right. You can say this, then you can say this, and then you quick tips, quick information, quick snippets, quick tweets. So that's actually what I like about it. So but you can actually do a lot with Twitter. Now, I'm not going to show Twitter stories or their fleets here, and I'm also not going to show. They do have in their app, they did release what they call audio file. So you can actually have an audio conversation now, similar to Clubhouse. They call it Twitter Spaces. So literally, you can click start a space, and you can have that live audio conversation right onto Twitter. So they did do that piece that I would say would be a little bit more on the cutting edge versus, Instagram, Facebook. They kind of haven't gotten there. I don't know if they will. Maybe they won't. But Twitter did adopt the audio only from Clubhouse, which I thought that was very interesting that they did go that route. And then they do have stories on their app as well, which is, they call them fleets, which again, I love that Twitter has decided that they are going to kind of, again, stick with their brand. I think that's what I really love about them is they've stuck to their brand. They've stayed true to it. And they don't just call things what everyone else does. Everyone else calls it stories. They decided they call them fleets. So good for them.
Yeah. And so the audios, I know we're not going to spend much time on them or anything, but are the audios, they're just set up to start and then have conversations, but they're not like rooms where you add people in?
So people can join your space, but it's not something that you would kind of pre-schedule and stuff like that. You can. They're not there yet. Clubhouse gives you the ability to do, here's my event in this, club, or this room is going to start at this time. And
if anyone's still out there using Clubhouse, let us know, because I haven't been on it in weeks.
Yeah. And you know what? I saw something on Twitter, or sorry, not on Twitter, on LinkedIn recently. And literally someone asked that same question. They said, is anyone still using Clubhouse? Is that still a thing? And a couple of people did post and said, yes, they're still using it. But it's definitely dying down. It's not as popular as it was. So I'm actually going to remove this overlay.
Okay.
So I think it's interesting that Twitter did decide to adopt the Spaces version. I haven't seen it been very active. I don't think they've promoted it very much. It's just that they had the capability, so they kind of clicked the button to say activate, which has been really interesting.
Well, I think Twitter is probably the most notorious for keeping quiet on when they add something in. I remember when they added Fleet, it just showed up. I didn't know about it. I was just like, what's that? Clicked a button. So, Yeah, it's interesting because I did read, and I haven't done it yet, but did you I'm sure you've read, but you read about Twitter Blue that they added. So they've added Twitter Blue, which is a subscription series, and they only have it. So those of you who in the US who follow us, you don't have it yet. I think it's only in Australia and Canada.
Yeah.
And it's a subscription, which is kind of interesting because it gives you a 30-second countdown to change your tweet if you misspelled or didn't tag somebody, which people have been asking for forever, right? And that's the one thing that's always bothered me about Twitter. It's like, when I made
you don't have the ability to edit.
No. So that's interesting. And then it also, it just gave you some prettier like folders and stuff. But I'm like, would I pay $3.95 a month to edit my tweets? Probably not. I'm not sure about that model yet.
That they decided to kind of adopt that route. I don't really know why they decided to go down the subscription route when most social media platforms you can edit. So yeah, you're right. Would I pay for that? Probably not.
No, and I think it's interesting because I know their revenue model right now, but all revenue models are the same. You work your revenue model on your ads. They have ads. They wanted another revenue stream, which I get, but I just don't understand how I can justify, $4 a month or like $3 in the US. When it launches, it's $2.95, I think, in the US. But $3 a month to be able to like edit my tweets and make fancy folders and stuff, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, you can pretty much do everything you would ever want to do on the free version. So I probably won't go down, but I thought it was a very interesting model. And again, like LinkedIn has their premium, but it's quite a higher premium and you can do a lot more with it. So I understand from that perspective because they're talking about, again, like Sales Navigator and, their leads and how to use those and all of that.
Right.
But Twitter for like $3, it just seems a little odd. Yeah. But anyway, we love Twitter.
Yeah, we love Twitter. So
but there's a lot you can do on Twitter. So I just want to talk about sort of how you would interact on Twitter, but also how you would post on Twitter. And Twitter also was the first platform to start with hashtags. And what I like about the way that they use it here is it's explore. So literally here it's explore. So this is where you find information. So typically what you're going to see is what's trending, right? So unfortunately, COVID-19, vaccines, like all of that stuff is trending right now, but you can start to look. And so Twitter adopted very first one to do that you can literally look for a topic and you can search for it under this Explore tab and you can start to see what's trending. So I can literally click on here and see what's trending right now, which I find very interesting that summer in a bowl is trending, but whatever. But that's promoted by Wendy's. So again, even hashtags can be promoted on Twitter and you can pay for that. But because I live in Ontario and in Canada, we have what's trending number one locally is Ontario vaccine. And that's not a surprise. No. Everyone's talking about that. So we can literally see what's going on in the world. So if something happened right now and that conversation was happening on Twitter, you would see those hashtags start to quote unquote trend and you can follow those conversations, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what can you do on Twitter? Well, you can do a lot of things on Twitter. You can share a photo. So very basic stuff when it comes to social media stuff, right? You can literally type. And what I like is, we can go hello, and you see this little circle. Okay. So it's going to start to fill in as the hello there. You can literally see the circle starting to close with the amount of characters. And when that circle closes, you've run out of characters. Right. So it's a visual right there. So I'll take that out. You can type or you can add a photo. The photo does not take character counts. So you can literally upload anything you want and you can type and you've got the same amount of characters to go, which is great. Right. You can do a GIF, which are always so much fun. And but that's again was same with all the different social media platforms. But what's interesting, you can do a poll, and this one's really kind of popular on Twitter is the fact that you can do a poll. And I've seen it a lot. LinkedIn you can do polls, and I know on Facebook you can do polls. But Twitter polls are really quite popular, especially when you're talking about Twitter chats, which we'll have a conversation about, hashtags. You can look for these different conversations, but they've done a really good job. So you can add your choices, your poll length, and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Emojis, always so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy today.
What I like about Twitter is just it's a different demographic, right? So you don't get the TikTokers and the very young ones. You don't necessarily get corporate people. They're on there, but they're not. Some are, some aren't. We talked about before, a lot of companies, that's their main way to get their customer service. A lot of politicians and celebrities, people that only want to talk in sound bites. So it's an interesting platform on that side.
And one thing that they added after many, many, many years of begging, pleading people, their feedback, that kind of stuff, is finally they've added a schedule button, which they never did before. It was always with Twitter. It was like you could schedule posts on every platform, but you had to use a third-party scheduler in order to schedule your tweets to go out. But now you can do it right native in the platform. So good for Twitter. Right. If they just added an edit button, I would be on top of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay. So you can now schedule your tweets. So that's newer in the past, I would say probably year even. It's been pretty new that you can schedule your tweets. So I think the biggest confusion with Twitter is the vast majority of stuff that's on Twitter and how it's hard to filter out. And people get very overwhelmed when they go onto Twitter and they don't understand how to use Twitter. So when you hop on Twitter, what would be the way that you would quote unquote use Twitter?
If I'm not posting and I'm looking, I immediately, almost immediately go to a hashtag. I almost immediately do a search on a hashtag. I'm looking, if I was looking for vaccinations in Ontario, I would do vaccinations Ontario. And I know that I would get all that, if I'm watching, an awards show online, and you can do the hashtag and everything will come up there. I like the fact that I can look at the top tweets or the most recent tweets, right? So it's kind of like, you don't have to look at what it's deemed as the most retweeted. Instead, you can look at what's the newest. So I love all that.
So let me see. What could we search for in Twitter? Let's just say networking. We had a networking event this morning, so let's go with networking. Right. So I can go top, which is the ones that are getting the most engagement. This is sort of what she's referring to. You can do the latest, meaning the newest. And that's what I like. I like to see the latest conversation. So what is the most recent thing within 22 seconds ago that somebody has put in? Now, one thing I do like, again, Twitter has changed this over the years, is it used to be that you had to put that hashtag symbol, that pound symbol, number sign thing before the word. So the only things that would come up in my Explore are if somebody did hashtag networking. Right. But they actually took that away, and now anything that somebody just have it in their tweet that doesn't have to be hashtags will come up in your search, which I like because not everybody will necessarily, especially again, award shows or TV or current events or anything that's going on. You may not think, oh, well, I guess I should put the hashtag in front of it. Right. You don't have to worry about that piece.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. And obviously you're going to have a mix with everything else. You're going to have a mix of tweets as well as ads with any of your feeds, right? Because obviously people are trying to get in there. So, and then you just look through and you can literally see, again, short snippets of information so you can process and you can look at it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about it, you click on the link.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, and it's just, I can't say enough. You'll get in the habit if you're not using it. Like for today, for example, our internet's been bad. And the first thing I did was look up Cogeco, which is our provider, Cogeco outages. And they have an account. They have a Twitter account that tells you if they have outages in the area. So, really interesting. And they hashed. So if you put Kojiko outages, you don't have to know their handle because, as Stacy said, you can just put it in the search and it'll come up.
Yeah, and people in the search, that's where, again, if you were doing, Kojiko outages, you wanted to find people that were that had I would, because I'm doing a search networking, it's people that have networking in their username. So you could just type in Kojiko and you would see all of the different accounts that they would have with that name, which is kind of cool. And then, of course, photos and videos. So I love the fact that, again, I think the thing with Twitter, it becomes very overwhelming because there's so much, right? You have so many hundreds of thousands of people that are literally putting short sound bites of information out there. And I mean, one person could tweet, 8, 10, 12 times a day.
Right.
Multiply that by hundreds of thousands of people and you get a vast majority, it's so much information. You physically can't keep track of it all, which is why I do exactly the same thing that Faye does, which is narrow it down. So either look for topics that you want to see the information about, or simply start to scroll through. I would say the most challenging is things like, I'm just going to see if I could find one really quickly. Okay, so let's just take this one, right? Sharon, who I follow. So I get my second one this Saturday. Son gets it July 1st, trying to book other sons right now. So you don't have context. That's, I think, probably the biggest challenge, is because you see replies just like you would see a regular tweet. People are like, I don't understand how to follow this. That's where it gets a little bit, because you'll see a tweet that just says, yes.
Yeah.
You don't. So again, what you can do is click on it and you can see the context, right? She's replying to this particular person, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge when it comes to Twitter. But Twitter is a conversation between you. And the one thing about Twitter, which is the whole point, is you could also publicly, these are public conversations that are taking place. Yeah. I could very easily comment. I could reply to her. I could retweet it, means sharing it with a comment. If I went to retweet this, I could just send it out and just go share it, or what they call quote tweet, which is I'm going to now comment on her.
Yeah. Right. That's the one I usually do.
Yeah, I can like it, which is, again, this is newer for Twitter to click the like button. They never had that before. And then, of course, you can also share it, which is very similar to a retweet, but this is where you would share it into like a direct message or copy or something like that.
And that's when you're getting a lot of retweets and likes, it works like any other social media platform. So those algorithms are going to push you up to the top tweets because everyone is retweeting it. So that if you're trying to get leverage in Twitter, that's the game, is you want people to retweet your tweet.
Exactly, which is kind of the whole point, right?
Yeah.
So if you did find someone you didn't really know who they were, obviously you can click on them and go to their bio. I'll show you the bio in a second. But if you just wanted to see, you can unfollow, you can add and remove, you can make lists on Twitter, which is great if you want to really narrow your information down, going, okay, here's the top people that I follow and I really want to see their stuff first. You can put them on a list and then you can just go to that list and you see all the tweets for those people.
That's a good way if you're running a conference, or you can like have a list of all your speakers, right? Yeah. So that you can make sure that you're including them and they're tweeting out to all their people. So it's an easier way to track.
Absolutely. And if you are going to an event, one of the things that I do, it's like, well, what's the event hashtag? So that you can follow those tweets and follow that conversation along. I know literally I have gone to larger conferences. I go onto Twitter because it's in the moment and I see what people are saying, and then I'll reply and I'll comment. And we end up having this conversation and it's like, well, what table are you at? Because I really want to meet you in person, in real life, call it IRL. And all of a sudden it's like, well, I'm at table 2. Well, I'm at table 6. So it's a great way to interact with people. And that hashtag makes it ability to basically be found.
Right.
So yeah, you can mute people as well. So if they're in a Twitter chat or they're just having a lot to say and you're just kind of done, you're like, okay, you know what? This is filling up my feed. You can literally mute them. And now I'm just going to unmute her. I don't want to mute her. She won't find out. I could mute this conversation because you're seeing too much of it. Again, same thing.
Right.
I could block her, I can embed it, or I could report it. So bio. Do you want to look at your bio? Let's look at Faye Chapel.
Don't know if it's up to date.
I don't know. Let's find out. So this is your bio, in case you haven't seen it in a while. So very similar to all of the other social media platforms. You do need to make sure your bio is number one current, up to date, and you kind of similar to. I'm gonna kind of compare it to Instagram a little bit in regards to, except for the fact that there's a header photo. Right. So Twitter has a header photo. So this is actually timely because we're going to be launching Gia very soon. So we'll just leave this one up.
Yeah.
So good job. And we have a headshot, obviously, making sure that it's similar. That's just what I recommend, that it's similar across the board to all of your other social media platforms. So they know, yep, this actually is the Faye Chapel that I want to follow because I follow her on Instagram and maybe she has a different content here on Twitter.
Right.
And then we have your username. So you can change this. I would highly recommend, I can tell you my story after, but I highly recommend that you be consistent in regards to all of your other ones. So it's, you don't want to be sitting there going, well, I'd like to follow you on social media. Well, and you take a deep breath and you're like, I'm this on Instagram and I'm this on Twitter and I'm this on, like literally I went to Twitter first. Yeah. Exactly. So whatever I could get on Twitter is what I put across the board for everything. So try to make it consistent with all of your other social media platforms. And then you have 160 characters for your bio, which is exactly the same as Instagram. Right. So we know she has a podcast. She also has a podcast called The Mastermind City. It's a very good one. You should listen to it.
Yeah. You might be listening right now.
and we have, so basically we have, now this is one that we were not able to get on Twitter. Unfortunately, we had all the other ones. We did have to switch this one up on Twitter to the Master City as opposed to Mastermind City because it was already taken, which kind of sucks. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, you have to, but I mean, it's a reality that a lot of people face, and you have to, do something. The good news on it, to be honest, guys, the good news is most people are clicking to go over your Twitter from somewhere else, whether it's your website or something. So, most people aren't really actively punching it in. They're actually clicking from your other backlinks. So they'll get there eventually.
And then I know you guys ran into a situation with On Point Mentors that you actually had to create a second account. Was there an ownership?
No, that was the interesting part. Yeah, it was interesting because like the one thing about Twitter, which is they just randomly will say, no, you can't have that account, or they'll block you or something weird. So we had got that account 6 months or so before we even started the company, and never had tweeted anything because we had just grabbed the URL. And then when we went to use it, they blocked us and they said, you can't use it. It's not yours, but it was ours. So we actually had to start a second account. Because it literally took, I don't know how long, maybe 6 months to finally get it back. And there really isn't, the one thing on Twitter, I will say, not a lot of people that you can talk to.
Right.
So
that's very typical with any social media platform.
Yeah. So we went back and forth through their messaging for about 6 months before we said, look, we own the account. You're blocking us from our own account. And we know, because it basically said it's in violation of, whatever, bad language or whatever. We hadn't tweeted yet. That was the whole point. We never even posted one thing.
That's interesting.
So, so you have to be careful sometimes. So again, you have to be a little bit fluid in terms of being able to move and get another name. So rather than wait 6 months, we just took another handle and said, we will figure out what to do after when we get it back. But we didn't want to just say, oh, okay, well, we'll just wait 6 months till you figure it out.
Right. Yeah. And I know that's a challenge with all social media. I know people who have had their different accounts hacked and you have to prove ownership.
It's hard.
It is. It's very
hard to prove ownership. Very hard.
Yeah. Because you don't have to have even your real name associated with your Twitter account.
Right.
So, which is kind of crazy. So you do have a link as well. We use the Shorby link because it has the most recent stuff that we have. And Shorby is very similar to Linktree, very similar to anything you would use on Instagram. It just gives you sort of that list of different links that you can go to. So we keep that one. We both use that on our account. And then you can just see when she joined. So you joined in March of 2009.
Yeah, long time.
So the one thing that's different from Instagram and Twitter is that, number one, you can put a link in. When Twitter first sort of came out and they had their 140 character limit, that included the link, right? They don't really include it. It's kind of, I don't know the full answer to whether they include it now, because sometimes I feel like they do and sometimes I feel like they don't in regards to the character count. But before they did, they had a very specific character count of 140 characters, and that included the link. So if you wanted to put a link in your tweet, you had to make it, which is why things like Bitly and tinyURL sort of came out, was because of Twitter, where you needed to take a longer link and make it into the shortest amount of characters that you could, so that you could also use the rest of the characters. So it became very creative in regards to how you can get your message and all of the information you want to promote, or, a blog that you wrote, or something that people could get more value from, whatever the case may be, in a very short amount of characters. So they've doubled it now. So you have 280, which is great. But you still have sometimes the necessity to shorten that link.
Right.
Which is kind of cool. So I was just trying to see if there was one. Let's go to home. I wanted to see if there was a tinyURL there that I could show what that looks like.
A lot of Twitter now, it just shortens on its own, right?
I haven't seen that. Have you seen it shortens on it? I haven't seen that. I know LinkedIn does. They've shrunk it, but I have not seen Twitter do that. There it is. So you can see the Bitly link there, or I've seen tinyURL.
Yeah.
Which are ones that shorten that link, and that's where that came from. In case you're wondering why there's weird looking links, it's fine. It's just because somebody has shortened that particular link. So when you go exactly what Faye had said before, which is you can search up here for people, right? I just searched up there and I found Faye Chappell. I just typed in her name. I didn't necessarily know what her Twitter handle was, but you can just literally search for things. You can search for topics. You can search for people. So if you do, I do encourage you, when you are going to go onto Twitter, search for stuff, or just go through your home feed before you start to tweet. I think the biggest overwhelm is the jumping into conversations. So I would suggest that you just start to listen first. That's anyway, if you're new to the platform, is to listen first. See how people talk, see how you can kind of click around and kind of follow the context of conversations. There are still things called Twitter chats. Do you remember Twitter chats?
Long time ago. Yeah.
They still happen. And that, again, is based on the whole concept of hashtags. So Faye and I could literally say, okay, we're going to have a Twitter chat at, I don't know, Monday night at 7 and follow hashtag, I don't know, Mastermind City for the conversation. So you would literally go onto Twitter. You could click the search, or you could click explore and type that in, Mastermind City, hashtag Mastermind City, and you would see all the tweets that were related. So what they would do for Twitter chats is and this is again where just some of the lingo comes from, is they'll go question 1, and they would ask a question, but you would had to use the hashtag, and then they would go, and then for your answer, you would have to go answer. So A1, and you would put in your answer, including the hashtag. Right. So it was a great way to meet a lot of people. I participated in a lot of Twitter chats when I first jumped onto this platform. And really when I first got into social media in general, I loved them.
Well, I mean, it was it. Twitter was it. I mean, that's the truth, right? Like, so everyone was on Twitter because really the other platforms weren't very robust.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, again, none of the really younger crowd uses Twitter unless they want information. And then remarkably, they jump on Twitter very quickly.
Right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
so true. So true. So yeah, so there's a lot of stuff. Like I said, hashtags that sort of came out, a short piece of information that came out,
And one
notifications.
thing, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, it was interesting to me is, the one thing that they talked about on that Twitter Blue and subscriptions was they have these folders where you can actually organize the ones you want to save and the ones you want to kind of follow and stuff. And it is interesting on that realm because it's true that once you see a tweet, it's kind of gone. You never really see it anymore. So if you're trying to follow something, it's a little bit more challenging because there's so many people on the platform. And I read a really interesting thing that I think we're going to try, which is when this one person said what he does is when he comes out with a new blog, he posts this to the same blog 3 times during the day. However, he changes the sentence. So he changes what he tweets. So it might be one thing about the blog, the second something else. And so he has an opportunity 3 times in the day to get retweeted, to get action into his blog, which normally people would say, oh, you can't, repost, do that 3 times. But what he's doing is he's retweeting a different line, even though it's going to the same blog. So I thought that was really interesting, unique, different little things that, people can think about. And the other piece, which I thought was interesting, was that he's corporate, and he realized that, most corporate people work on meeting mode. So they might have a 9 to 9:30, 10 to 10:30, or 10 to 11. So he tweets at like 9:03 or like after the 9:33, after the meeting would be over. So kind of interesting stuff that you can like play with and see if it works.
Absolutely. And you're right in regards to sharing your blog or anything like that, because it's context, right? Yeah. So if I was writing, the 3 tips for whatever, maybe tip 1 is like, well, I already know that and you ignore it. But tip 2 is, oh, wait a minute, I'm paying attention to that.
Right.
So you can really, separate that out, learn how to do this, but it also includes the other ones and sending it to the same place. And You're right. I mean, tweets go at a astronomically fast rate. So you literally, you have to think about it's in the moment, because a lot of people are like, I posted that on Twitter already. And I'm like, you posted it 2 days ago.
Yeah.
That is so far gone. It's like, the joke, right? That was so yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, like, even for us, I was like, so we have a mastermind dinner coming up on Friday. And there's different elements to the mastermind dinner. One is that some people will come just to network, right? Some people will come to learn how to make a cool recipe that they don't really cook, and they would think it would be fun around somebody else. And some people might come because they like where we're doing. So we're taught, like, this Friday is about New York. So we have 3 different opportunities right there to push the mastermind dinner. And I just thought, well, we haven't even taken advantage of it. So as we talk to you guys and give you, some of the stuff that we think is a great idea, we haven't done that. So now is a time for us to try it. We're going to give that a shot this week and say, okay, let's see if we get action in with these different ways. Now, the one thing you can do is, which is interesting, if you want to test them, is you can actually if we have our mastermind city dinner, we have a link, so you can go ahead and join us. So if we put it into Bitly and we generate 3 different shortened URLs, and they're different for each of those 3 things we send out, then we would actually be able to test out for free, which tweet got more traction.
Absolutely. And positioning and all of that stuff. And absolutely love analytics. I've talked about them like to death sometimes, but they do have analytics as well. So if you go and you want to see how your tweets are doing, which ones have the most interaction, likes, all of that kind of stuff, you can absolutely go to the analytics. I'm not going to dive too far into this today because it's kind of goes down a little bit of a rabbit hole that I don't want to go but basically that's where you would go and find those. So I just want to talk about, just because I know, again, it can be overwhelming. This is where the lists could be. So you could literally create a list right here, new list. Here's the description. I can make it private. And then I can decide who is going to be into that list. And then I can go to my own list and go, okay, so it's like your own, the only amount of accounts that you see, so you don't have to see everything within the Twitter.
Right.
Twitterverse. We call it Twitter.
That's right.
So I would encourage you to look at Twitter. I encourage you to listen in Twitter. I encourage you to search for things in Twitter before you use it. I encourage you to either look for different accounts. If you follow them on Facebook, maybe look and see if you can find them on Twitter, or if you follow them on Instagram, take a look and see, because a lot of people are a lot more active on Twitter, whereas maybe they only post on Facebook once or twice a day. Same thing with Instagram. You may find over here on Twitter, they actually post quite often. Because again, tweets happen so fast. So if you're following, again, like Faye said before, a news channel or current events, or you want to find out anything that's going on in the world, search for it on Twitter. I guarantee you 1000% somebody is saying something about it.
Yeah. And you know right away, you can search for reviews on products, on companies. Like and again, we kind of take it for granted, because I literally probably see Twitter every single day. And I do take it for granted. And as I'm sitting there going, what should I post on Instagram? It doesn't even occur to me on Twitter, because, you shorten it, you use something else. But I don't think I've had a specific game plan for Twitter in a long time. And I think maybe it's time to really say, okay, this is a great platform. They've been around a long time. I think there's a lot of very smart people on Twitter. There's a lot of funny people on Twitter, because it takes more effort and work to actually write that one sentence than it does to post a picture and blab on and on about it, like on Instagram.
It's very true. It's very true. And I know we've been very transparent, very open about the fact that we don't post a lot on Twitter, but it is absolutely our go-to for our listening strategy.
Yeah.
So it is both. So where do your people hang out? I remember speaking at a conference a few years ago, and at that point, I'll be completely honest. I was taking people off of Twitter because their clients were other places, and I don't believe you necessarily need to be everywhere. However, when I got to this conference, that was their main platform. They said this is how they got business. This is how they were communicating with people. This is how they were meeting. This is conversations that they were having. They were discounting other platforms because they got most of their business and interaction all from Twitter. Yeah. And they've stayed true to that. So very interesting way of doing things.
Yeah.
And different things work for different people. So I encourage you to give Twitter a chance.
And you know what? You can do it like we do. I mean, we post from, we use Publer. There's a whole bunch of different Hootsuite, all those guys. You can use anything you want, but a great piece of software like Publer allows you to use the same type of information you're posting somewhere else, but it tells you that you have to cut it. It tells you, no, you can't have all those words. So you actually have the opportunity to get in there and customize it to, in fact, fit into the Twitter feed. So you don't have to natively understand how to post. You can continue to use a third-party posting if, they include, obviously, Twitter. And I think every single one of them does pretty much. Now, I don't know if every one of them actually tells you how much room you have to write, because that's the secret, right? Some of them will just cut. If you post too long, it'll just cut. It just won't post.
Well,
There's
so
no
for
fooling it.
example, what a lot of people will do, and I saw one earlier, and I was just wanting to know if I saw it here really quickly. But what I have seen in the past is people will go over to Instagram as an example. I was just trying to see if I could see one really quickly, but I don't think I do. Is that they will... Sorry, I was just trying to say no. What they'll do is they'll post from Instagram and they'll click post over to Twitter. But the problem is that you need to know how it lands over on Twitter. And what ends up happening is because of the character count is it'll go through, and then when it's done, it'll go ... and it'll give you an Instagram link. Right. And you don't want that because it doesn't, I like posting from third-party schedulers like Hootsuite. We use Publer. There's a lot of other ones that are fantastic because it customizes it per social media account. Very important. The lingo that you use on Instagram, there's a link in bio. I can put the full link on, on Facebook and Twitter. So the lingo is different. But when you post from Instagram and you just go, oh, I'm just going to fly it over to Twitter, it doesn't work and it doesn't land well.
And I don't want to click a link off platform to go read it over on Instagram, because you're assuming, for those of you lazy people who are doing that, you're assuming that Twitter people have Instagram. There's so many.
Exactly. And that's not necessarily the case.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just seeing if I could still find, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. So I would encourage you, if you are going to, again, I love the fact that Twitter has come out with a scheduling, which is amazing. But I just encourage you, listen, take a look around, search for something on Twitter that's current, whether it's current events, current news. I think the fun thing is, if you're watching a TV show tonight, search for it on Twitter and see what people are saying about it. All of the stuff that you see on Twitter is public, right? Yeah. So you just go in and you can search for anything. Search, and again, it doesn't have to necessarily have the hashtag associated with it. And you can see the different conversations. So you can start to understand how people are replying to different people and the context in which they're having that conversation.
If you've never followed an election on Twitter, you should. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And even, like how it goes up and down and up and down. And even like if you're watching like a music, awards show or something, people will, comment about the performer. Did they like them? Did they like the performance? It's just interesting that you can be watching and having a conversation with someone at the same time and giving them your input. I think it's a great platform. And, one of the best, one of the funniest things that I find is when Jimmy Kimmel rolls them all up into something he calls mean tweets. Yep. And celebrities actually read what people tweet about them. And I think it's funny. It's not meant to be harmful. It's meant to be all in good fun. So if you have that kind of warped sense of humor, you'll like Twitter.
Well, like I said, I think the biggest thing for me is the fact that from an enjoyment, like personal enjoyment perspective, is watching, whether it's reality TV or whether it's a music show or the Oscars or whatever the case may be. I love seeing people's opinions, and literally on Twitter is where they share the most opinions as opposed to any other platform. I find a lot of people share educational information and they share what they're doing and here's this. But if you have an opinion on what somebody's wearing or, something happened on a show that they weren't expecting, this is where they will put their opinions. And it's very interesting to read that stuff, especially if you're watching it live.
Yep, for sure.
Okay, well, I encourage you to go try Twitter. If you want to follow us, great. We will definitely make sure that we'll follow you back. Let us know that you have seen it, and let us know what your experience is on Twitter and how you intend to use it going forward.
Yeah, great. Looking forward to it.